All right, what we have is a accusump diagram. Here we have the engine. Let's call this the block. Okay. Here's our oil cooler ports, right? The forward port is the feed from the oil pump. So it comes from the oil pump down the galley to the forward port on your oil cooler block. This goes to your cooler, okay? Whatever kind of cooler you have. Goes through the cooler, back out of the cooler. Okay, so this is cold oil into your engine, and it goes into the back port, okay? Now, if you're running an accusump, there's a few ways to do it. On the front of the block, there's a galley here, okay? You can utilize that. I've seen people do that. It's a metric crush washer fitting. I think it's 16 millimeter, but I'd be lying if I told you I knew what it was off the top of my head. So this makes a clean install. You got your accusump here, and this dude literally just goes right in there. Another option is, and this is how I typically do it, you have a scenario where you have low oil pressure. Your oil pressure sensor is here, right? If this dude is getting low oil pressure, the last thing I want to do is I want to feed it. I don't want to feed it anywhere in this portion, right? Because there's lag time. So if I feed it here, we already have low pressure here. If I feed it here, it has to go down the galley, into the cooler, through the cooler, back into the engine, right? That seems counterintuitive when you're trying to get the engine the lifeline blood that it needs to continue running without having catastrophic failure. So what I do is I put a T right here, and I feed my accusump into this line. So from the oil feed, somewhere in here before the front of the block, right, it's about 24 inches, somewhere in this line, this is where I want to feed my accusump into. And yes, it's not cooled, but it is the closest source to feeding the engine with oil that it needs to maintain oil pressure. So that's why I like installing them there. There's 6 answers to this question, and there isn't a wrong one. And the fact that someone has chosen to run an accusump is a good decision all the way around. If you have a wet sump car, especially a C6, or you have a early batwing pan, early one-piece batwing pan, C5, you can run an accusump almost without even question, because the early pans were very poor. The newer pans, the 2-piece batwing pans, were better, and you can also get the improved racing baffles, which we've tested to over 1.6 G without problem. But it's never a bad idea to put an accusump on a wet sump car, especially if you're road racing it and you're on R compounds or slicks and you're an aggressive driver, because what's the last thing that could happen? And that's bearing failure due to lack of oil pressure. So anyway, if you have any questions, let me know.